Like I thought, like, and then like it just doesn't work out.
I'm ready.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to a celebration of literature and living writers. My name is Megan Marshall. I'm the director of the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series. Tonight, we are so very excited to have a dazzling poet with us, who is sure to delight in many ways. But before I introduce her officially, I do want to thank those who have helped to make this series and this event possible. And that includes all of our friends from Love Library. I have my fabulous co-host, Markle Tumlin, who deserves his own round of applause for all of that. I'd also like to thank Danya Nuka Hall, Laurel Bliss, and Rebecca Williamson. And of course, I need to thank the Department of English and Comparative Literature, as well as instructionally related activities for their continued support of the series. And then our friends from Aztec Shops, including Michael Ramirez and our friends over there in the corner who are selling some books. Yes, there are books for sale. So if you would like to grab a copy, of course, you have to pay for it. But I'm sure you might want to get it signed before you leave this evening. Lastly, it's imperative to acknowledge the space that we are privileged to share this evening. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations. And as members of the SDSU community, we acknowledge and celebrate this legacy. And finally, just a few reminders. If you have yet to do so, please silence your cell phones. Unwrap any loud pieces of candy you might have that you want for the evening. Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce our featured poet. Born in New Delhi, India, Vandana Khanna is a writer, educator, and editor. She is the author of 3 collections of poetry, including Train to Agra, which came out in 2001, Afternoon Masala, which came out in 2014, and her most recent, Burning Like Her Own Planet, which was just released this year from Alice James Books, and from which she'll be sharing from tonight, as well as the chapbook, The Goddess Monologues. Her work has won many awards, including the Crab Orchard Review First Book Prize, the Miller Williams Poetry Prize, Diode Editions Chapbook Competition, and the Elinor Benedict Poetry Prize. She has been published widely in journals and anthologies, such as the New Republic, Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, New England Review, Guernica, and the Penguin Book of Indian Poets. Khanna earned her BA from the University of Virginia and her MFA from Indiana University in Bloomington, where she was a recipient of the Yellen Fellowship in Poetry. Khanna's work has been lauded as gorgeously lush, carefully wrought and patiently lyric, and emotionally complex, always dazzling. All very apt descriptions. But what pulled and continues to pull me to her work is its ability to do what Jane Hirshfield says only great poems can do, to make by words and music new possibilities of perceiving. The poems in Burning Like Her Own Planet wield musical intensity and intelligence. They conjure mythical landscapes in which timeless tropes of desire, fidelity, power, and erasure are made new. Landscapes that are at once brutal and beautiful, a mingled draught of bliss and pain. They challenge our perception of what it takes to be called goddess in any epic. How sometimes it might mean you forget the music your own voice makes, or that to be the favorite, you have to give in. Let him call you by the wrong name. The work in this collection also pushes perceptions of poetic form with its use of persona, dramatic monologue, and broken sonnets. Of the form, Paisley Rectal raves, Khanna's sonnets seduce as much as they startle, speaking back to these ancient South Asian stories to critique and finally redefine what it means to be a girl and goddess. So we are so grateful to have her here with us tonight to maybe both startle and seduce. So please join me in welcoming Vandana Khanna.
Everybody, can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. Thank you, Megan, for such a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Blas, for initially inviting me. It's been great to be on campus for the last day or so and meeting some of you as students in your classrooms. It's been such a joy. So I'm going to, hi, senior. So I'm going to start with a poem, actually, not from this current book, but from my first book called Train to Agra, which was, I think, a long time ago, like 20 plus years ago. I don't like to talk about that, but I think I'd like to start with this one in particular because I feel like some of the seeds of ideas that I have kind of blossom in this third collection really started way back when. And sometimes, as a lot of you are writers, it's interesting to see where, you know, like an idea, a thought, like a whisper at the back of your head, you start to write in a mode, and then like years later, you realize like, oh yeah, I was really kind of prepping for this moment. So this first poem is from my first collection, and it's called Elephant God. And it's actually based on this article that I read where this was now years ago, where people in a small village in India were like holding up spoons of goat milk up to these like wooden statues of Ganesh, who's a Hindu god. And somehow, miraculously, the milk was like disappearing. So it was like they were kind of like feeding the statue, and like somehow the milk disappeared. So I was always a little intrigued by this idea of miracle. So this is called Elephant God. If I was a good Hindu, I would believe, as my mother does, that ashes sprinkled in the Potomac River will somehow reach the Ganges, that my father, reborn, is somewhere in the world, someone else's husband, father. Or maybe I have it all wrong and he's a daughter, not Indian or Hindu, just living in a cold city near a river that flows back upon itself. I'm waiting for a sign like you calling from Delhi to say the wooden elephants are drinking goat's milk. All over the country, people spoon it into tusks and mouth. The milk's slow trickle, cracking thick skin, the wood brittle as teeth, blessed, ready to snap. And it's something like religion. Behind carved wood, ivory tusks, there is something drinking, someone listening to prayers with milk. I wait for the day a postcard left in my mailbox will say, yes, I am here. It is wonderful. Every hang up on my answering machine is him calling over and over just for the need to say he is somewhere in the world. I will ask, is the river really that color of night? And whisper words in my childhood tongue, something like Ram Ram, something like make me holy. So the next couple of poems are going to be from this book, which is my latest book. It just came out, and I was just joking with my friend about flipping through the book, right? Like when we were growing up, when we were baby poets, we would go to these poetry readings. We'd have like the poet make sure that everybody kind of saw it. But because my eyes are failing, I just kind of am more practical about it. But So this book is kind of a mythic retelling of some famous Hindu myths. And I first came up with the idea as I was reading these like picture books about the myths to my then young son and now like 6 foot tall son. And as I was reading these myths, I noticed like that all the goddesses were just kind of like pushed to the side. They were like plot devices, but they didn't really have any agency, and their stories weren't something that that the authors tended to explore. So that kind of sparked something in me, and I thought, well, like it would be interesting to write from the perspective of these goddesses, and like what would they think about some of these myths and their treatment in some of these myths. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And so the other, I guess, theme that I'm really interested in this particular book is the cycle of death and rebirth that happens in Hinduism. So I have a series of like creation myths and destruction myths. So this is just one of them. And this is on page 30, and it's a creation myth. You're a different kind of girl, one only a god could love, one the animals spurn because they like you better lonely. Creation isn't for the faint of heart. Let him fashion you from sandalwood, stardust, and soap, from navel and seed. Give up all the thin hymns you once knew. Become a bird that never shuts up, a river that won't flood with drama. Become a tangle of wives, the tight clutch of girls, a swarm of goddesses. Wake from the tiger in your dreams, and with all the hands you're given, pull at the thick gold scruff of this world. So next poem is on page 2, and it's Prayer to Recognize the Body. There must be a word for this heart growing, to explain these teeth, stinging like a gift, tremble of sweat coaxed from scalp and flesh. The next thing I covet, the third eye's velvet blink, the green pulse in my veins of a forest I can't make myself step out of. And what of all the things remade, swabbed free of salt? Because who can tell the difference in the dark between antlers and branches and bone, between the thick haired chest of an animal and you? So sometimes in this book, there are goddesses that are named, primarily 2 major goddesses, Sita and Parvati. But sometimes there are also these kind of like general goddesses that kind of embody an idea or a theme. And this one is called Self-Portrait as a Goddess After the Fire. Page that is on page 24. And this is kind of loosely based on the practice of sati, which is named after a goddess, where the widow sacrifices herself on her husband's funeral pyre. So they kind of share the practice in the name of the goddess. So this is a self-portrait as goddess after the fire. My heart is no lantern. No matter what they tell you, it's not all marigolds and ram ram like some Hindu cheerleading chant. At first, all I wanted was fire, soot-lined face, hair in needles of light and heat, the tight fist of lungs like a blazing hive. Red flame, blue flame, it was all the same. But then, right before my bones flared like torchlight, singed fingertips smoothed to a shine, I thought of the cool cusp of the moon, river water soothing my throat, contracting around me, a muddy womb, muck and silt lining my mouth like a new word for smoke, for freedom. Instead, I have cinder cupped into the curve of my body, all this worthless ash. So one of the goddesses that I wrote about was Sita, and I was trying to explain in one of the classes this idea of her kind of like life story where she keeps getting exiled into the jungle, like back and forth. And so it kind of gets to be very dramatic. And so this poem is based on landscape. So one of the ideas that I had in this book was like, rather than just strictly retelling these stories, kind of wanted to create a mood. And with the mood, I kind of imagined these goddesses as characters within a landscape. So there's a lot of like work done with color and since she's perpetually exiled in the jungle, so there's lots of like jungle imagery. And my thought was more than like hitting every beat in a story was to kind of like relate the emotions that a character or a person would feel instead. And this one is for my friend Kazim because he wanted this particular poem. And it's on page 21 and it's called Sita Considers Her Rebellions. She remembers from inside the story, inside the forest heat, a flush of green, a dowry of twigs, tree trunks thick as lies. When she is allowed, she misses herself, covets the clean corners where her bones meet, the soft pulse of her tongue on his, all those misplaced stars, a misery she can't find. She has killed things, though it is forbidden, with her hands. The wedding mehndi long faded, has eaten on the wrong day, forgotten to fast. She has pulled the strings of the jungle behind her like a black net, a wide-mouthed yawn. She holds it tight so it can't grow when she isn't looking. So sort of a companion piece to that is Sita in exile. So a lot of Sita's story is that she's kind of like this iconic wife figure, loyal, faithful. And so at one point in the story, she gets kidnapped and held in this kind of villain's castle. And when she's rescued and brought back, you know, there's like lots of rumors and whispers, and people in the village don't believe that she hasn't been violated, truthfully. And so it's so interesting how some iconic stories just seem to repeat over and over, even in our contemporary culture. So this is after she has been brought back, they devise this great idea where if she walks through fire, like the trial by fire, if she walks through fire and doesn't get burned, then she's, of course, the faithful wife. And so she does do that. She doesn't get burned, but still her husband doesn't quite believe her. So I know. So yes. And so she kind of goes into self-exile into the jungle, this poor woman. Because you know, after a certain point, she's like, you know, I've done everything and you still don't believe me. Sounds familiar, right? Okay, so this is called Sita in Exile, and it's on page 17. Before the forest, giving in was easy. My hands for your prayers, my skin for your mouth. But once your doubt grew taut, it was all fire. My ruin begun in dirt and rubble, 14 years of leering branches, of stars plotting against me. Now I sleep alone in the sweat of the afternoon, wakened to an evening peeled open. I bless all that is seen and unseen with a bucket of river water, under the ruff of my hair, in the quiet between arms and thighs. Gaunt as paper, I wander the walled garden, pull my melancholy close, a numb shawl. I beckon the tiger to come and lick my ankles free of ash. So the other kind of goddess that is pretty prominent in this collection is Parvati, and so kind of like in a shorthand, her story is that she would like to lure the god Shiva from his thousand-year meditation, his long meditation. So he's been meditating, and so she would like him to kind of like open his eyes and notice her. So she figures out like the best way maybe to make that happen is if she also kind of gives up all like earthly possessions and wants and kind of shows him how holy she is. So it's kind of like from the can't fight him, join him kind of mode of working. So this is Parvati Practices for Austerities, and it's on page 31. The first thing to go, the word soft, the clean teeth of a comb, the color red. Then I forget what I look like or don't care. Weave twigs in my hair for clips, make believe mushrooms are pearls, sheath my feet in slippers of dried mud. I teach myself to hold the hum of Om in my lungs until I'm holy, until you open your eyes and see I'm an empty bowl, careful with my wanting. I can wind the hot gnaw of hunger into a tight spool, body ready to snap, ready to sing any song you want from the thin reed of my throat. My narrowing proves all I've given up. Look for me, a bone-white sari wrung free of this world. Tell me this time I'll get what I want. So this next poem is more of like a general mother goddess poem, but I kind of imagined the Lord Krishna's mother. So Krishna was like this guy, was like this goat herder, and he was very charismatic. And so I kind of had this voice in my head of kind of like a domineering mother, kind of like a maybe like a mother-in-law, although I always say when I read this poem, I do love my mother-in-law, for the record. But like I just kind of imagined this kind of overbearing mother with her son. And so this one is the mother goddess, trying to find a page. I'm sorry, I can't quite. Oh, yes, 32. The mother goddess advises. Watch out for the one with pink cheeks, with wrists that can twist to music. She wants you for the wrong reason, the way the blue of your skin reminds her of the sky after a monsoon. Resist her tender shoulder, the smooth slope of back. Resist her slim ankles, her milk scent, her wonder. You can name every flower, every animal in the darkening forest, and she simple, only calls out the obvious. Marigold, peacock, bull. Okay. So this next poem is kind of like a breakup poem in a sense. It's a lot of like these kind of anti-love poems, maybe breakup poems. I was also interested when we were talking, when I was thinking about like reincarnation, kind of what happens to romantic love when you're a god and a goddess and you get reincarnated. Like what happens to that romance? What happens to that love? And so this one is called "The Goddess Shows Up Late for the End of the World Party." And I believe that's on 53. Sorry in a tear, faith an ungodly mess, a run of red from one lip to the other. Over there, a blue-skinned flirt, a Krishna looking past me to the goddess from the next lifetime, the one with the light eyes who shows off her belly ring, swings her baroque hips just so. Forsaken, reincarnated beyond recognition, till I can't compete, can't find each other on purpose, on the dance floor or in print, the ink on this love long dried. If you let me stay, I'll let you cut your teeth on my heart until it becomes a black forest beating out of time, beating me out of this world. So this next poem, I was telling Megan at dinner, somebody on Twitter, like in the last year or so, asked me a question about an image in this poem. I don't know who this person was, but he was like, Aunt Van Khanna, what about this one image? What did you mean by it, you know? And so I was saying, like, I just never responded because I was kind of like, there's got to be a little mystery here. Like, it's not like, as you all know, you're all writing students. It's not like a one-to-one equation. It's not like I wrote this, which immediately equals X, Y, and Z, right? So, and then truthfully, I was like, I think it's pretty obvious, but maybe not. You know, like, don't we feel that way in workshop where we're like, it was obvious, and people were like, it was not obvious. But I kind of feel like this was obvious, but whatever. So I never responded to him. He can be out there just making up his own ideas about the image in this poem. And this is called "The Goddess Tires of Being Holy." I'm trying to see if I can find it. It's on page 59. Call yourself whatever you want, girl or goddess. Truth is, no one loves you any better. There's not enough gold in the world to make you feel holy, hallowed, whole. No gloss pretty enough to save a face marked by tragedy. For your trouble, a handful of thorns, a bit of marigold dust. This is what you get for begging to be chosen. Every god in the universe eyeing you through the clouds like a hot wound he can't help but press. That terrible beating in your veins, so loud it makes your blood hurt. That's the part you always get wrong. The one where they watch you burn and burn. So I just have maybe 2 poems from this collection, and then I wanted to read a few new ones. I don't know. So kind of ending the cycle of creation, I also have a few destruction myths. So I have creation and destruction, this idea of cycling through life. And this one is on page 61. When the world has me by its teeth, it's what I deserve. The bite and bruise of slack-jawed faith, tongue stuttering on the names of gods, one syllable at a time. Then my prayers, blood-laced, wasp-heavy, dragged through dirt and honey and pine, are what I bring to be blessed. I can sing like all the other girls, my lips the wrong shade of martyr, my gold just as bright, each hunger starved. I want to learn how to turn all these hurts holy, but no one speaks animal and leaf. I mean to say yes, but in whispers, everything ends up sounding like death. So the ending poem in the book is called Dharma. And for me, I think there are lots of different ways you can translate some of these ideas. But for me, it was more like this idea of a duty or creating order in a universe. But it was also this idea of like repetition and living according to certain kind of decided principles. So this is the last poem in the book, and it's called Dharma. Dig a cave, put your best goddess in it, call her by a new name, dress her as a red bride, then a white widow, stitch her to the sticks on the ground you call a bed, with her hair's long black tinsel. Lay dull flowers at her feet, the kind that limp and brown with a look. Call this worship. Pine for her. Tell her she is too beautiful for this world. Accuse her pink mouth of deception. Hold your hand tight against her throat until it throbs like a sun. Start again. Thank you. So I'm just going to read a few new poems. So these are poems kind of also based on myth. So I'm going to finish, I promise, I'm going to finish with myth with this last book. And then somebody's going to have to give me something new to work on. Part of what struck me in 2017 when I started writing these other poems, it's like we had just had kind of this very terrible, bizarre election, and kind of we were as a country, maybe even as a world, in this very strange space. When I started writing these poems, I was trying to sort of think about the way the past and myth also speaks to the present, right? Like we were sort of talking about certain ideas always seem to be perpetuated. So for me, the book that I'm working on currently is based loosely on the Odyssey, and it's about, of course, Penelope. It's about the wife that's left behind, but it's also about these suitors that I kind of imagined as these sort of uber macho kind of guys who drink all the wine and kind of take over Penelope's house and won't leave. And I was also sort of thinking about our culture at that time in 2017 and what it meant to kind of live in that period of time that we kind of got out of, and I hope we kind of stay out of. So these are loosely based on that. And also around the same time, the translator Emily Wilson came out with her translation of the Odyssey, and now currently she has a new translation of the Iliad. And so I was very interested in, I would listen to interviews of hers. She talked a lot about her approach as a woman, and it was, you see it more, I think, right now, if you follow Twitter at all, the weird kind of misogyny that's getting flung at her based on the word choices and the way she's kind of constructed her translation, which I don't think you can separate from her as a woman in our culture. So I thought that was really interesting. So this one is called Suitors Know Best. I stuff cotton in my ears, bits of bird's nest, anything to stop all that talk from those suitors. They know best. They must tell me. They insist at every turn to know who I voted for in the last election, want to hold me down and look them straight in the eye and don't lie. I shake my magic 8-ball every night with the desperation of a girl without an escape hatch. Won't give me the answers I want. Won't tell me when these suitors will shut up and stop barricading my house, stop pulling on my apron strings. My bathroom faucet drips all night consistently, morose, and yet not one offers to fix it, not without a bride price. They want me to dredge up all that I've hidden away under my bed, shells and wind-worn sails, a feeble bit of sea wind in a glass bottle, and lay it in the middle of the floor for their inspection. They want me to offer up my bedraggled heart so they can say, pull yourself together, girl. They're good at telling me what's wrong with me, at ignoring the grief gleaming down my back, unbound, with its one knot that refuses to be chastised into submission. And then, so part of this poem also, I've written a group of epistolary poems. So it's like Penelope addressing an absent husband named O. And I kind of like this form. I'd never done it before. I've tried to read like novels that are written in these like letter forms, but sometimes I find them to be, I don't know, a little tedious. I don't know. But for me, what I did recognize as a writer is that the form of writing a letter to somebody who isn't really there kind of allows the speaker / character to kind of really investigate how they're feeling about any number of different things. So this is called Dear O. What you want from a wife is different. To see a husband as all remorse, all hurting, to build a moat around her heart that thickens with thorns every year. What's a girl to do with an old wound, a weak stitch, a mouthful of brine, an endless ocean of knots, tinseled and threadbare? Every night, the moon is a smooth omen staving off the inevitable. All the suitors breathing behind the door, warping the wood with their want. How far is it really between my water and yours, between my ocean and river and rain? How many nights to braid the bride I was into the woman I am? That girl narrowed by life, dressed in salt and spite, cursing the man who loves water more. I'm gonna just end on one last poem. Thank you all for coming out. And really appreciate being in this lovely environment. So part of the voices in this fourth book that I'm working on is also the voices of these oracles, but they're kind of like know-it-all busybodies, and they always seem to be handing out like bad advice or kind of really judgy. So that's kind of how I imagine them. So this one is called The Oracles Don't Want Me to Speak. The oracles don't want me to speak ill of the dead, of the men hanging off the balconies, catcalling, of the suitors with their wet songs and wolfhound smell hanging in the air, of the flattened city in my mind, the cliche of wives and their quaint offerings, the rubble-filled fields where the soldiers' horses froth and foam. How I was left behind, a bride crying in cold cotton. How he must have told the others I'm raw wool to their muslin, coarse by comparison, that I have a talent for staying. How I had 19 recurring dreams, one for each year, the tropes always predictable, water, ship, teeth, that all the birds are omens, but no one knows which ones are lucky. Thank you.